Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I'd like to continue on with the 31 days of cop films and gangster films from the year 1970 to the present day. And today, for this video, I'd like to focus now on the gangster film genre or category or subcategory. And the film that I have planned for discussion today is one that has a very complex and very involved release or production history and release history, with various versions that were constructed or reconstructed sometime many years after the film had been filmed and production had started. However, it was never fully quote-unquote completed until there had been some release versions that had been made over the course of years, most notably a DVD release version of this film that occurred around 1998. But ever since then, there have been a number of versions of this film that have been made available, and they have their own distinct qualities in terms of materials that are included or omitted, new materials that might have been shot, editing choices, and the like. And so we are talking about a film whose history is quite detailed and quite involved. But for purposes of today's discussion, I'd like to focus in on the release versions, or in particular the release version that can be found in a recent release made by the great team over at Arrow Video. And they released this and other films by this legendary filmmaker. And the versions that are made available here, I think, form a great starting or jumping off point for anyone who is interested in further discovery or study or exploration as to the film itself, as well as the various versions that exist out there. Because as I say, it is an incredibly rich and informative history. And I think part of the reason why it is, or one of the reasons why it is rich and informative as it is, because it also shows and highlights not just how people and artists and audiences today view this work and the work of this filmmaker, but it also indicates to us just how legendary this filmmaker is, and also how incredibly unique one can say this film fits into the already grand and legendary filmography of this filmmaker. So before I get into anything further, I'm speaking about a film which has among its incredible cast people like Riccardo Cucciola and Aldo Caponi and Luigi Montefiore or George Eastman, Maurice Poli and Leah Lander and others. And this is based on a story called Man and Boy. And one of the versions, or one of the titles given to one of the versions that one can say is considered maybe one of the standard versions of the films that's currently made available. The title of this is, and please pardon me for my poor pronunciation of the Italian language, but Cani Arrabbiati, or as this particular version may be known in English, Rabid Dogs. And the filmmaker in question is none other than the one, the only, the great, the legendary Mario Bava. Mario Bava's work here, in the version that is known as Cani Arrabbiati or Rabid Dogs, is a work that is so startling and so filled with threat and menace, a type of nihilistic viewpoint philosophy that is espoused in this tightly wound story that is shocking and suspenseful, highly suspenseful, claustrophobic, and it's a real pressure cooker of a story within the confines of this, or within the expressions of this as a cinematic work of shocking entertainment. We have an exemplary a film from the great filmmaker Mario Bava, it is a film that is undeniably a Mario Bava work, but at the same time, it sits uniquely in the filmography of Mario Bava in many ways, and it comes rather late in his career. We understand that it began, or it had its start in terms of its production history in the early 1970s, and it later found a form or voice in terms of various release versions, as I so indicated earlier. For example, the 1990 or the DVD release version um, that was made in the late 1990s, and then various other versions that were associated that were not associated with that. And then, as an example, we have two versions that are found in this Arrow video release. One is the version of Rabid Dogs, and then the other is a version called, often referred to as Kidnapped. I think these two versions and a side-by-side comparison alone gives one an indication of just how deep the complex history of this film is. And that alone is, I think, a really fascinating example of what this film is operating on. And if we focus in on the story, let's take the version Rabid Dogs. If we focus in on the story, we are in for one heck of a ride. Really, we are dealing with the criminal element. These could be described as criminals. Maybe they are. They might be part of maybe a gang or something, a loosely associated gang. But these are criminals that are committing a crime or a number of crimes, and due to the various sudden exposure of circumstances and situations, in terms of them trying to get away from the police, get away from the authorities, they end up in this claustrophobic situation with hostages and a car, and fleeing, trying to get to a hidden location after having committed a very high profile crime indeed. And so we have this, as I say, this pressure, high pressure, intense situation, this pressure cooker intense situation taking place primarily in this car setting, with the hostages and the criminal element combined together in this very close, almost sweltering heat type of situation. We feel the passage of time, because one of the incredible aspects of this film is how it treats time in this real time passage fashion. And so that only adds to, or not only that adds, that incremental aspect of time creates this exponential feeling of fear and dread as this building and building and building. We have the way in which danger is just around the corner, could suddenly erupt and emerge at any time. That just builds and builds and builds. We have the extra added element of illness and the passengers and the hostages, and that just builds and builds and builds. And we have the ever-changing relationships between and among the criminals, the people who are taking the hostages and trying to flee from various crimes that they're committing. That just builds and builds and builds, and you realize that the clock is ticking. People are thinking, people are plotting, planning certain things. At the same time, we realize just how far these people can go, and the various characters that we meet, how far they are willing to go, or how far they try to go but are stopped along the way, what their hopes and aspirations say about themselves in the situation, and how they might be in line or parallel, or how they might be totally in conflict with each other. And if they are indeed in conflict with each other, what is the end result of that conflict? And that end result might lead to sudden eruptions of violence and a high intensity drama that are also very much part of the life and death stakes that are involved, again, in this real time, edge of your seat thriller type of situation. And also, we have the almost the idea of hope and not hope and aspiration, but hope and the efforts in trying to escape on the one hand, versus the the incremental type of encroachment of the feeling of hopelessness and nihilism that is a part of the portentous and potential nature of the environment and setting and atmosphere that we have part of the proceedings here. This is to say that this film, Rabid Dogs, is a it is a brutal, and it is an unforgiving, and it is a totally mind-blowing experience that feels so fresh and vivacious and vicious and unrelenting. And there are levels upon levels upon levels upon levels. The stakes are raised, and they are raised even more so, and they are raised even more so. The heat is on, the pressure is applied. People are becoming more stressed and more intense. The clock is ticking. That might mean life or death of particular characters that we meet. Or is it what we really think it is? Or is everything what we think is, or is there more to the situation than meets the eye? And that leads to further issues of the the outlook of this film, whether this film can be said to be optimistic or pessimistic, whether this film can be said to have hope or is totally nihilistic, and what the engagement is on the part of the viewer, and what it is we are seeing or what we think we're seeing versus what it is actually going on. And there's so much of that type of interplay within the grammar, the visual and cinematic grammar of this great work, Rabid Dogs. And as I say, it that doesn't end there, because we have perhaps just as complex and nuanced as the narrative that the Rabid Dogs, or the version which is known as Rabid Dogs, brings with it. We also have the complex and quite intricate situation of the release history and the production history itself. So there's so much going on. And to add to the fascination of this film, we have how this film sits in the filmography of Mario Bava, the great, great Mario Bava. As some of you may know, this film, however one counts the release of this film, whether one counts it in, say, the 1970s or beyond that, of course. Suffice to say, it is a film that came about rather late in the career of Mario Bava, and already it was a fascinating, grand, brilliant career with so many masterpieces by him and the filmmakers that he was working with, the artists that he was collaborating with. And so, on the one hand, a film like Rabid Dogs could be said to be very consistent with that filmography, and indeed it is. At the same time, undoubtedly, there are so many novel and different and quite unique aspects of this film, Rabid Dogs, in the context of Mario Bava's career, that this could be said to be a totally new chapter, a completely different approach, a new type of story, or a new type of method of telling a story in the quote unquote real world situation with real time, as it were. And this becomes almost like a fresh take on Mario Bava's filmmaking style and approach to cinema from his own viewpoint. And so that alone also is an incredible aspect of this film, and how it sits in the context of Bava's career. It is amazing. Every aspect of this film is amazing. One thinks about this aspect or that aspect or that aspect, and one's mind is blown. Truly, truly. This is a very complex web. It is a gritty and suspenseful work of entertainment. And every time one watches it, one is swept in. And when one wants to read more about the details, again, there is so much involved with respect to Rabid Dogs, or the versions that we are talking about with regard to this work. One of the standardized versions of which is referred to as, or is given the title of Hana-bi, or Rabid Dogs. So, but this is a film that, if you are interested in the crime genre, or Italian crime film genre, then this is one that, if you haven't seen, you've got to check out. You have to check it out. This is a really important work in that field. This is a really important work in the field of the importance of Mario Bava. And as it stands as a crime film, I've classified it today as a type of gangster film. Maybe that might be a loose, liberal interpretation of that categorization in the context of this film, but I think we can agree that it does involve the gangster element or the criminal element in that way. And so that's why I'd like to use this, or the opportunity to talk about this film. And indeed, this is a film that is that if ever there is an opportunity to talk about it, my goodness, it's so worth it, because this is one of the greats. This is one of the greats in the genre. This is one of the greats in Mario Bava's great career. This is one of the greats. And if you haven't seen it, you are in for a real treat indeed. Now, one other note, perhaps for those who haven't seen it, if you have the opportunity to choose one version or the other, or for example, if you say opt for a version, say like the Arrow video release or one of the Arrow video releases, whatever the case may be, and in that opportunity, or you have the option of choosing which version. For instance, as I say, there are two versions included in this particular release: Rabid Dogs and Kidnapped, and so each has its own, I think, really interesting take to it. I think the general consensus is that the Rabid Dogs version, is probably the one to go for first. And so, if you have that opportunity, then I can definitely go along with that general assessment of which version to approach. That being said, if you have the opportunity to watch Rabid Dogs or Kidnapped or whatever version you have, and that's the only opportunity you have available to you, then by all means take advantage of it. Really, it is each version has its own strength and its own peculiar perspectives on the story. And so I think you are going to be in for a real treat indeed. But for me, if I'm going to choose, I would choose maybe Rabid Dogs, and then we can go from there. Again, there's so much to choose from. The history is rich and the history is deep. And once you've started, I know that you will want to continue on with your journey and exploration of this work or this aspect of Mario Bava, because it is indeed, excuse me, so worth checking out. This is the work which is from Mario Bava, and as far as this particular version goes, it is known as Rabid Dogs. Okay, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I very much appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.